The truth.
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 Welcome to Trusting the Truth with Samuel Tolley, where we view the world through the lens of Jesus Christ. We do not view Jesus Christ through the lens of the world. How you doing? This is Sam Tolley with Trusting the Truth. And today is part 2 of my interview with Pastor Artur Pawlowski of Canada. In part 1, we got to delve into his personal life and the miracles that God performed with his son. And in this part, we're going to deal more with the crisis in Canada. So let me bring on Pastor Artur. How you doing, sir?
Good. Thank you for having me back on your show.
Well, thanks for coming back. When we talked the last time, we talked more about how God moved in your life and how he miraculously healed your son. And that was a very powerful situation. But then, like I said, when you left Poland and you moved to Canada and the ministry that you've been involved in out there, and all the challenges with the law and people that's running government. So you got this church, street church, where you feed people 3 times a week. Let's talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, so when we emigrated again from hell, that's how I describe growing up behind the Iron Curtain under the boots of the communism and socialism. So we moved to Greece, and then from Greece to Canada. We moved to Canada because living in Greece was really beneficial, if you will, if it comes to money. However, the business aspect of it was, again, run by corruption. I mean, Greece is a beautiful country with beautiful people, but everything has been done, at least at that time, under the table. You had to bribe the politicians, you had to bribe the police, illegal immigrants, illegal foreign workers, Albanians. It was hard. It's like from one trouble, we end up in another trouble, a different kind of trouble. So money was flowing. We were building houses for the richest people on earth. However, you had to deal with this corruption, and we were just sick and tired of it. We just wanted to move to a country that is free of that kind of corruption. So when we had a meeting at Canadian Embassy, and the officer told us, come to Canada. Canada is the freest country on earth, and in Canada, no one will ever persecute you for your faith. Well, we've decided to move. In 1995, we moved to Canada, Calgary, Alberta. Alberta is on top of Montana. And I went through all kinds of seasons in my life. And then eventually in 1997, we started a business again, and we were doing very, very well. And again, the police was not coming for an envelope full of cash. The politicians were not coming for the envelope full of cash. We could just do business, pay taxes, and not be bothered. And in about 1999, I had a little bit of a wake-up call, and I started to pay attention to what's going on around me. You know, when you're in the business realm, you have a tendency to ignore everyone else. Nothing matters except money, business, clients. And that was me. That was absolutely me. My wife, in another hand, she was always following God. She always tried to bring God into my life. And it took her 7 years. Then we had this unbelievable, to this day, encounter with the living God and the death of our firstborn son, Nathaniel, and God raising him up literally from the dead. And I shared that story last time. Well, that really showed me in my heart that there are things more important than money, more important than houses and sport cars and being able to eat in the most expensive restaurants and meeting powerful people, politicians and business people. That encounter with that situation of God raising up Nathaniel, healing him, showing me the vision of the crucifixion and speaking to me and showing me how awful, evil of a man I was. Well, that shook me to a point that I started to really pay attention to what's going on around us. And I started to volunteer for the first time in my life on the streets. And of course, I had no idea. No one really is teaching you in a church how to go and really evangelize. Not many churches do it. No one taught me how to deal with prostitutes and drug addicts and drug dealers and drunkards on the streets. But I joined a group of people and we started to give pizzas away. And so from that moment, for 3 years, we were ministering on the streets and we were called the pizza preachers because
Mhm.
we would bring pizzas. And it started with, hey, $5, $5, $5. And we brought, five pizzas, and we had few homeless people joining, and we're listening to the testimonies and worship and music and reading of the Bible. Then more people started to come, so we had 20 pizzas, 30 pizzas, 50 pizzas. When we reached 120 pizzas every week for the night, we realized we can't do this anymore. It's just too much. And so we came with this idea of how about we do a church for the poor. And instead of renting another facility, another building, you got to remember there's about 500 church buildings in the city of Calgary. So instead of doing another one, we've decided to do a church for those that don't want to come to a church building. And we call it simply Street Church. That was 2005. Of course, between there were all kinds of different things that God was teaching me, talking to me. In 2005, I had a number of businesses. I owned a magazine that was very successful, development company, building company. I had renovation companies, and we were doing all kinds of different things. Business was going well, and I had an office in the most prestigious place in the city of Calgary called Bankers Hall. And I'm sitting at my office looking at City Hall. Of course, is a place where millionaires hang out, and life is good for me, and business is doing well. And I started other projects and joint ventures. And God speaks to me. He says, take your stuff from your office and go out in your underwear and do not look back at Egypt. So, for a Polish man, for people to understand, for the Polish man, the idea or the slogan, go in your underwear, it doesn't mean you got to strip naked and go out of the office. It means leave everything behind.
Okay.
So for the
Yes, you clarified that.
Yeah, because God speaks to you with the language you understand, the culture you understand, right? So he simplifies things for you, because if he complicated things for us, no one would ever make it. So he speaks to you the way you understand. To me, he speaks to me through nature. When I travel, when I see things, he would speak to me, and not even that I would sit and, okay, God, let's talk. No, it was I would be doing things, observing things, and then God would speak to me about what I'm observing, what I'm seeing. So that's how he has been communicating with me forever. It's just through nature, through things, through people. And in 2005, he tells me to leave this lifestyle of business, and he called it Egypt. And I did. I did. In 2005, I left the office, never went back, lost millions of dollars, lost houses, properties. But at the same time, I knew I can do more than just a weekly evangelism with the pizzas. And the ministry was growing, 250 volunteers, 7 locations in the city of Calgary.
Mm.
And we decided to organize this in a more powerful way. We started Street Church at the spring of 2005. And I went full time. from 2005 to today, so 20 years, we are in a full-time ministry, and it grew within few months. I think 3 months we took 600 people off the streets. The ministry was booming. God was showing up, signs and wonders, healings, miracles, and when we started to grow and things started to happen, we started to have police officers, bylaw services, and politicians getting involved in the
Well, wait a
ministry.
minute. Before you go that far, what do you mean we took 600 people off the street?
So our ministry is very simple. We bring, as the media started to call it in 2005, a shop, which is a portable church with barbecues, with speakers, pickup truck, big, huge cross, and other gifts and things and Bibles and gospel tracts. It's like a portable church. That's why we call it street church, because it's on the streets. And we can set up anywhere within few minutes. We can set up a church in any location, and that's exactly what we were doing. We chose to come to the worst ghetto in a city, right outside of the shelter. It used to be called the Needle Park. Why Needle
Mm.
Park? We had locations in crack cul-de-sac. Of course, you know why, because of the crack and the drug activity. We went to the darkest places in the city of Calgary, and we set up the church, which at that time was 4 times a week, and sometimes every day for months, every single day, because God was doing such a miraculous things. So we went to Needle Park. Why Needle Park? Because you literally were stepping on needles everywhere. There was about 50 drug dealers, about 50 prostitutes with their pimps. It was hell on earth. Murders. We witnessed people being slashed, murdered. People are raped there. Police refused to come. Neighborhood refused to come. It was hell on earth under the bridges in downtown. So we decided to bring the church right there. And of course, I had knives being thrown at me, pistols, um, attempted murders, gang attacks, all kinds of things were happening to us. Punched. We had prostitutes stripping naked in front of us on camera. It was a gong show
Why did you guys go there?
because it was the darkest place. And you see, the concept
Mm.
that I think the church is missing is that we are to be the light.
Mm.
And you can go to the darkest room in your house, but the moment you bring the light, it's over for the darkness. So we've decided to go to the worst of the worst. That's where the light shines the brightest. That's where
Oh,
the light is
Lord.
needed the most. And yeah, it was crazy dangerous at first, but we took authority. Week after week, we prayed, we did Lord's Supper, we worshiped for hours, we took authority, and people started to respond. Instead of being hostile to to the message, they started to respond positively to the message. So we were baptizing. It's just by the river. So I baptized thousands of people right in the river, and they were coming. They were changing their lives. They were being healed. And our ministry, what we did was not only preach the gospel and feed them. And why we were feeding them, why we still feed the homeless people, because they were telling us, preachers, remember we used to bring pizzas, and they said, it's all good, you're telling us about this amazing loving God, but we're hungry. And I said to them, what do you mean? Like, what do you say you're hungry? Shelter is feeding you, right? The province of Alberta is designating hundreds of millions of dollars to fight homelessness, and I know this for a fact because working with the homeless people, I see truckloads, semi trucks delivering food to the shelters every single day. And so I said, what do you mean you're hungry? They're feeding you there. No, they're stealing everything they receive, and they give us garbage or very little or pasta without sauce. I was absolutely shocked at the level of corruption in my own city, because when you don't work with the homeless people, you don't know what's really going on, right? You give your donation to an organization that's supposed to take care of the homeless people, then the government, so your taxes are being designated to help the poor, and the system goes on. I didn't know that the system is literally corrupted to the core. It's rotten to its foundations. That the CEO of, let's say, a drop-in center, which is the biggest shelter in the city of Calgary, I think in the province of Alberta, has a twice as big of an office as the mayor. He lived at that time in a mansion for $3 million and drove a $100,000 car at that time. That was, a big deal 20 some years ago. And I didn't know that majority of the donations are being stolen by the staff, by the people within the organization. So the people are hungry, and they were coming to us and they said, "You talk about God that loves us and cares for us, but we're hungry. You're telling us about this loving God, but we're hungry." So we decided to start to expand the feeding program, and we've met this guy. His name is Monty. I baptized him in the river. And he comes to me and says, "Art, the amount of money you're spending on pizzas and some other stuff, sandwiches, is just crazy. There is an easier way that you can do this. Let's bring barbecues and let's cook on flames, hot dogs and sausages and beef and whatever you can think of, chicken you can throw at the barbecue, and it's a great meal. Everyone loves barbecue." And I said, "You know what, logistically speaking, at this moment this is impossible for us." And I'm very grateful for the body of Christ, because God gives insights to different people, and he says, "Art, let me do it. I do everything, and you watch and see. If this is good, then we will continue. If it's not, then you go back to whatever you were doing." And I said, "Fine, it's a deal." So he brought his own barbecue. He bought everything he needed for this. And then I was shocked the amount of people that came, and the lineups were huge, and it was 100% hit. Why? Because it brought the people to hear the gospel, but also it was very, if it comes to money, it was very efficient. The
Mm.
amount of money slashed to like 10 times less when we started to do this way. And people were very receptive. A number of them received Christ, and then we would look for jobs. We would look for accommodations. My first homeless man was, his name I'll never forget, Marian Hook. He was a Polish immigrant, and he was living in a dumpster 7 years, in a dumpster.
In a dumpster.
Calgary. Uh,
Wow.
why is this so shocking? Because this is not your Texas, this is not Arizona, this is not Florida. Calgary can have minus 50, and you're freezing to death when you're outside. So what he did, he would cover himself with a bin lid on top, and covered with all kinds of garbage there to survive the winter. And he did 7 years. I will never forget his story. One day he started to cry, and he said one of the toughest days during that 7 years was when the dumpster, the dump truck came. And they usually have those forklifts. They pick up the bin and they throw it, and that's exactly what was going on. But he was inside and he was sleeping. So when the commotion was happening and he was half away in the middle of the air, he jumped out of that bin. If he didn't, he would be crushed. And some of his friends were crushed by the dump truck right inside the dump truck, when they didn't realize there was a person sleeping in a dumpster. And he said, "I jumped out in a split of a second, saving my life, but my heart was left behind." And it was such a tragedy for him, because in the middle of the winter without a hat, you're really in trouble.
Or his hat.
His hat, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
This made me just think of something that I would have never considered. The fact, once they dump the trash, then his home is going to be colder because there's nothing to cover him up in.
that's right. So he has to go and look for another neighborhood where the pickup didn't happen yet. And that was 7 years. So we picked him up from the streets. I rented an apartment for him. We fed him, we established him, we got him a job. And for the first time ever, he was able to go back to his old country to visit his grandchildren for the first time. And he was sharing this in a church, crying. He said, "I'm so grateful to God for what he did." and that was his last years. He was an older guy, and his last few years were the best years of his life, and eventually he died on cancer, and we were by his bedside when he was dying as a church. So many stories like this, and many people that we were able to take out of the streets. Some of them crazy stories from the streets are one day where we are there ministering, and there is a lame guy minus 35, I think it was, freezing, and
Minus
he's
35.
oh yeah, our record is minus 55 feeding the homeless Celsius. Minus
Wow.
55, yeah. So everything on the barbecue, everything was frozen except meat. Your buns are frozen, rock solid. Ketchup and mustard, everything frozen, except us and the barbecue and whatever was on the barbecue. And the lineup was still there. And this guy was laying on the ground where we showed up, and it took us four of us men to carry him inside the building. He was a huge guy, and by miracle of God, because we came at the right moment. He was unconscious. He didn't know what was going on. We saved the guy. We saved his life. And a few years later, Monty was walking on the streets. He was one of the four that we carried this man inside. And he was stopped, and someone is yelling at him, "Hey, Monty, stop." Hey. He's waving. So Monty goes over there and says, "Well, you don't remember me, right?" He said, "No." "Well, remember this big guy that was laying on the ground, unconscious, and you took him inside? Remember that guy?" He says, "Yeah." "Well, that's me. I have a wife and two children right now, and I just want to thank you for saving my life." So stories like this
Wow.
are weekly. People would come to us on a weekly basis and say, "I was in your lineup. I have a job. I have a business. I went back to my family." That's almost every week someone comes to us. "Remember me 10 years ago?" Of course you don't. Well, I was in your lineup, and for months I was homeless. I was hooked on drugs or alcohol, and thanks to your ministry, my life completely changed. And of course, many people died during this 20 years, more than 20 years. I'm doing this for 26 years, but 20
Mm.
years full-time ministry. Many people died, people that refused to take the message of hope, and they continued on the lifestyle of drugs, alcohol, prostitution, violence, hatred, and all kinds of different things. So but going back to 2005, how I end up in the hot waters with the government? Well, unintentionally, I was not looking for a fight with the government. Why not? Because I was already in hot waters with gangs. I was already in trouble with drug traffickers, with pimps, because you got to
Mm.
remember, we brought the church in the middle of hell. And we were so successful at taking people off the streets that the gang started to notice. So they put a price, $5,000 on my head. I was attacked with knives, all kinds of different things. I was told to watch my back. I had to hire security to watch my back when I was preaching. They wanted to stab me in my back. I mean, crazy stuff were happening. So we had our hands full. And of course, logistically, feeding so many people and running church and meeting and praying and doing all kinds of different other things. It was overwhelming. So we were not looking for any trouble at that time. Also, the mainstream media, they were not as rotten as they are today. They started to notice, and they were writing a very positive stories. Street church growing on the streets, businessman leaves business and takes care of the poor. So very positive, very nice. And as ministry was growing and we were able to help more and more people, the politicians got involved. The bylaw services got involved. The police officers got involved. And I will never forget this first time they came to me and they said, "Well, Mr. Pawlowski, you have to stop what you're doing because it's illegal." And I'm like, "What's illegal? I mean, there is a drug trafficking business here. There's prostitution. There are murders here. There are rapes here, and all kinds of illegal activities. And you're telling me that me telling them that their lives can be different and feeding them and taking them off the streets, that's illegal?" And they said that's exactly illegal. So I was shocked because I read the Constitution of Canada, and within our rights, is giving necessities of life. I mean, every citizen has a right to receive necessities of life. Of course, there's freedom of expression, there's freedom of religion, there's freedom of peaceful assembly. And the police officers in the bylaws said, well, there is a law within the municipalities that states giving free goods and services without the permit is prohibited by law. So if I give you a sandwich, if I give a sandwich to a dying child on the streets of Calgary, I just committed a crime. If I give you a sandwich, you're hungry, and let's say I'm eating a sandwich and I break it and give you a half, I just committed a crime. I can
That's
go to
crazy.
jail. And there is also, they told me, of course, I didn't know that they have those crazy laws on the books. I was told that distribution of printed material is also prohibited by law. So me giving Bibles away, that I was breaking the law. Gospel
Really? Giving away a Bible is illegal.
is still illegal. In Calgary, giving away a Bible is illegal in the city of Calgary. People don't know that because the government is very clever. They don't attack everyone. They only attack those that they choose to target. And I have been chosen as a target. Why? Because we were very well known. We had 7 locations. We were doing a huge impact within the neighborhood. Also, I was all over the news. So the story was very visible. It was not anymore a hidden story like we had in the past few years when the police never had a problem with us, bylaws never had a problem with us. We were doing this every single week.
Could it also have been an exposing the corruption in the homeless centers and the fact that they were taking the money and not taking care of the people?
100%, because I had at that time I had my TV show. I was the first one to do a reality TV show on the streets, and it was the most popular reality TV show in the country. It was called Evangelism in Action. When we brought cameras and we showed how the homeless people are living, what they're doing, how they're coming to Christ, the baptisms, demon possessions, all kinds of stuff. And also, I had the radio show. So I was talking about the corruption. I was talking about drugs. I was talking about a government involved in this illegal procedure. So they started to retaliate. Mayor at that time, Dave Bronconia, stepped in, and he made a statement that this has to stop. That we are in fact lawbreakers. We're criminals because we are feeding the poor without the permit. We are giving printed material. I received tickets, and this might be a shocker to you, for $10,000 multiple times. I received tickets for a sign that was, they called it offensive, offensive signage. And the sign said, Jesus loves you. I got $10,000 tickets multiple times for offensive signage. And they said to me that the name of Jesus now is offensive.
Really?
And I have to take it down. I refused, so I got multiple times tickets. Also, I was charged with insane offenses like placing material on the ground. I didn't even know that there are laws like that. Well, they said when I bring the cross is attached, is freestanding. However, the lower part of the cross is touching the sidewalk, is touching the park, and that's material on the ground without a permit. And I remember when we end up in a court, the judge says, so this guy's shoes is also material on the ground, so everyone that is walking on the sidewalk could be charged with this law. And the bylaw officer says, yeah, technically yes. So this is the level of insanity that they unleashed on the ministry. Within few months, I was all over the news, including Russia. News in Russia. Can you believe it? In Russia, they were talking about it. In China, they were talking about this. Also, I became the first Canadian ever to be arrested for publicly reading Bible. No amplification system at that time. I was just reading Bible, Psalms to our church members in the public park to ourselves.
Arrested for the Psalms.
I was arrested. I was forced to walk backward, handcuffed. I faced a year of imprisonment for just reading the Bible. Of course, I won the case, and that enraged them even more. So when I won the case, it was an international news. That was 2006, and they unleashed hell on the ministry. I started to receive tickets after tickets for everything, stunting. They said when I feed the homeless, I am a distraction. Our ministry is a distraction to motor vehicles, which is a criminal offense. I
Well,
I
I'm
was
what, excuse me, but I'm wondering the church in Canada in general, when they find out that someone is being fined for saying that Jesus loves you, it seemed like that should have every church in this country should have raised up and protested, because that is tantamount to what every church would have to talk about.
Yeah, and at first, I have to admit, I was a very popular person within the church community. When I went to the ministerial, the pastors would give me a standing ovation at the beginning. However, the government is a very clever fighter. They threatened the church that if they get involved, they're going to lose their charitable tax status. Our charitable tax status was removed, taken away from us in 2008, and that scared the churches. They realized that if we will keep supporting our Pawlowski Street Church and the ministry that feeds the homeless and preaches the gospel, we might be next. And literally, when I was showing up at the pastors' meeting, they were afraid to sit with me. Even some people that I knew for many years, and they've told me, said, "Well, we don't want anyone to snap a picture with you because we might be next." And I realized, I think for the first time, I was a very naive Christian. I thought that we are all working for the same boss. I thought that we are all reading the same Bible. I thought that our goal is to forward the kingdom, to preach the gospel, feed the poor. If you want to see a perfect religion, take care of the orphans and the widows and the poor, right? That's a perfect religion. Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. Jesus never said, build me a church, a building, build me a synagogue, I need another temple. No, he said, go. We are to be followers of Jesus, and we are to do what Jesus was doing and is still doing. The book of Acts church. But of course, I realized very quickly that when there is money involved, they have no problem to sell Jesus for silver. No problem. Of course, the past 5 years proved my point that 99.9999% of the so called churches globally sold Jesus like Judas Iscariot for silver, and like Esau for a bowl of comfort, for a bowl of stew. So, but at that time, I didn't know. I was very naive. I thought that the government is good, that the police are honorable, the judges are following the law, and the church is actually working for God, not for Satan. Well, that quickly changed when I started to see how they behave and what they did to us. When I was popular, when I was all over the news, as a good guy, I had been invited to churches, and we've done documentaries, and I was a hero in the church. The moment the politicians got involved and the narrative of the mainstream media changed from a hero to a zero, when they started to call me troublemaker, lawbreaker, they said no one is above the law. Art Pawlowski is not above the law. Everyone has to follow the law. And I was, of course, screaming and yelling, what law? We're talking about human beings that are being raped and robbed and murdered, and we are saving lives. And you say we are breaking the law? I disagree. We are not breaking the law. You, by your implementation of this illegal law, you are the lawbreakers. And I remember police coming, giving me tickets. I received during that time over 300 citations, and I was arrested so many times I don't even remember. I was detained, arrested, thrown in jail, back and forth. I was even arrested for doing a press conference at the city hall. I was arrested for having a prayer meeting. Can you believe it? I was handcuffed and arrested for a prayer meeting. And that was since 2005 to 2015. I was more in court. Listen to this. I spent more time in court or with lawyers than as a pastor in church.
Mm.
It was some of the trials. for my horrible crimes of feeding the homeless, some of the trials were as long as 3 weeks. If you murder someone, it's faster. I spent 3 weeks every day testifying about what I do, why I do it, and it was a total insanity. Also, I witnessed that the corruption is at every level. Put it this way: I saw police officers lying, openly lying, making stuff up before the courts on their oath. I saw bylaw services. Like, one of the biggest liars I saw was Bisset. This officer's name is Bisset, and he was a supervisor for the bylaw services in the city of Calgary. Andrew Bisset is his name, and he was testifying about what he witnessed during our church service feeding the poor. And he made up an entire document. He created a document that was completely made up stuff, false. And of course, at that time, we were recording everything we were doing because we were in courts. And we knew that sooner or later, a judge is going to watch the video. And we don't know what the other party is going to do. So we end up in a court. I was charged with some insane, at times, I was charged 15 times a day. 15 times a day.
Charged 15 times a
Right.
day.
My record, I think, for one day was 23 charges in one
My
day
goodness.
for being a pastor, for just doing my job, saving lives. And so we end up in a court, and Andrew Bisset prepared and gave to the judge a document that was completely false. And of course, the judge watched the video and he says, well, that's not what I see happening. And your document is false. It's not true. And my lawyers cross-examined him, Andrew Bisset, and he said, officer, you are in a supervisory position, and this is the only document that you've created that the judges will see. Is that right? Yes. Well, aren't you concerned that your document is completely faulty, is false, it's not true to what really happened? Are you not concerned that this is a lie? And he says, no, I'm not. I'm not. Well, he lied. Of course, the judge didn't believe him because we had evidence of what really happened. And guess what the city of Calgary did? They promoted him right after the trial. He received a higher position. In other words, when you're good Gestapo, which means political police, when you're good Nazi, you will be promoted. If you lie, you cheat, you murder, you destroy lives, you will be promoted to a higher position. That's exactly what I witnessed. Police officers lying, city employees lying, making stuff up. For example, the complaints, they said, Your Honor, the community is complaining. You got to remember, community that no one wanted to venture in because it's hell on earth. Community is complaining that they are loud because we had, in that location, we had speakers, and they're loud. They are destroying our, ability to enjoy our properties, blah, 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 blah. And of course, at that time, we didn't know. Later on, it came up that the complaints were coming from City Hall. So the City Hall aldermen like Drew Farrell and Joe Ceci, which is now an MLA, he was a minister at some point for the NDP, which is a communist socialist party, devilish party. So those people lied and generated complaints to the bylaw services, lying to them, saying the community is complaining. But in fact, they were generating the complaints. That's the level of corruption. Drew Farrell from the city of Calgary, alderman, and Joe Ceci, which was after that greatly elevated and promoted by the province to the position of a minister for trying to destroy a Christian church. And that was going on for 10 years. I call it the 10-year war. And then finally, we won in the Court of Appeal 2015, and the government left us alone. We made a peace. They restore our permits, and we were able for a few years without government interference save lives. Then 2020 shows up, and of course, you remember what happened. I became the first Canadian to receive the COVID ticket. So 2020, beginning of 2020, the government sent me a letter, and they said, we're in the middle of this crisis. and you have to stop doing what you're doing, because you're endangering people's lives. And I'm thinking, like, you people don't make any sense. If we are truly in the middle of this crisis, then my services are now needed more than ever. I said, what do you think is going to happen to 15 to 20,000 different individuals facing homelessness on the streets of Calgary if you shut down shelters, which they did, and you shut down soup kitchens, which they did?
Mm.
What do you think is going to happen to those people? Because I know I work with the homeless people for, at that time, was 21 years. And I can tell you what is going to happen. They will turn into crime. They will break into houses, garages, cars, grocery stores, because people need to eat. Either you like it or not, everyone needs to eat, and those people need to eat. If you don't provide, or if I don't provide necessities of life for those people, they will get it somehow, and through crime. So I appealed it to the mayor. The mayor at that time was, he's the NDP right now, in the NDP leader, and they had Nenshi. He was the mayor. He's a Muslim and a homosexual mayor. So I appealed it to
A
him.
Muslim and a homosexual? How do you, how do
I
you work that out?
Welcome to Canada. Everything goes here. In Canada, they believe there are 72 genders, so everything goes here. Actually, in Canada, they believe that you can be a kitty if that's how you feel it, and the schools have to provide you with the litter. That's Canada. That's
Oh,
it's a
really?
mess.
You can have a, you could think you're an animal.
Yeah, it's a total insanity. So, going back to Nehed Nenshi, he didn't reply. I appealed it to the premier at that time. It was, of course, we didn't know, but at that time, he was viewed as a conservative. Later on, we find out that he is a rhino. He is a wicked, evil man and a homosexual himself. And
Trudeau.
no, that was a premier, and not prime minister. Prime
Oh,
minister,
okay. Excuse me.
Premier Jason Kenney. And then I've appealed it to every minister in his cabinet, and guess what? No one replied. Instead, they sent police officers, bylaw services, and food inspectors, and they declared to that they're shutting down the soup kitchen. And they gave me the first COVID ticket in the country. I became the first, and another lady from Lethbridge, I became the first. Two of us, we became the first recipients of the COVID ticket. I was told I would be arrested if I don't stop feeding the homeless, and that was 2020. The culmination of the 2020 was when the government shut down everything and they canceled Christmas. I don't know if you remember, the government canceled Christmas. Few weeks
Yeah.
before that, the government came on television, and the representatives of all levels of government, and they declared that children have a great Halloween, be safe out there and have fun. Few weeks later, the same people went on television and they said, we have to regret, but we're canceling Christmas. And the chief of police went on television and he said that I'm going to send constables. They will be monitoring the streets. If they see extra cars in the driveway, they will break the doors and they will arrest everyone in it. So what I did, I invited, of course, they said no Christmas dinners, prohibited by law. They said no coffee with your brother. You're not allowed to see your parents. I mean, total insanity. So what I did, I I invited my whole family and some friends to the biggest dinner I could fit in my house. I took pictures and I sent it everywhere. I said, "Come and get me." And then I went on television as well, and I said, "Who do you people think you are? You think you're some kind of green Grinches? You can cancel God. You can cancel Christmas. Well, I'm canceling you. Actually, we would be better off without you, devils, without the government. We would be better off if you disappeared and would not exist. The country would be better off without you. So I'm canceling you." And I invited people to the biggest Christmas celebration in the country. Thousands of people showed up. Thousands of people. You got to remember, during that time, Canadian government outlawed singing. Do you remember that? Singing was prohibited by law. You were not allowed to sing. So worship in the church is prohibited by law. Also, the Canadian government prohibited Lord's Supper. You were not allowed to have Lord's Supper. You were not allowed to gather. You were not allowed to sing. You were not allowed to do anything. You couldn't have a coffee with your brother. At the same time, you could take people to Walmart. You can take people to Costco. You could go to liquor store. You could go to marijuana store because drugs are legal in this country. The government gives fentanyl for free to the homeless people every day. Agents of the government are distributing free fentanyl to the homeless people.
You know, you just touched on something. I saw a documentary a few weeks ago, and I believe it was Calgary, where there was a bunch of people that were hunched over. They couldn't even stand up straight because of the fentanyl use. And it was so rampant, it was so bad that people started getting their spines twisted. But I didn't realize that the government itself is giving
Yeah.
people that stuff.
Yes, and it's we call them the zombie effect, right? That the body is twisted in such a way that they don't they cannot function anymore. They see things. They would look at the ground, and it's like a zombie state. And we see this on a regular basis. I mean, every time we are on the streets, that's what's happening. Today, we will be on the streets, and we're going to see those types of individuals. While we talk to them, we ask them how come they can get their drugs, and they told us. A number of them told us that the government agents are coming and giving us the fentanyl for free. So that's Canada of today. And
And why does the government do that?
to kill them,
What's-
to destroy them. I mean, that's the way. You know, you want to fix the problem of homelessness, you kill them. You kill them all, and you've got no problem. And
Okay,
that's
so you give the homeless drug addicts enough drugs to kill themselves, and on the other end of the spectrum, you got this thing. I think it's called MAID or something, where the euthanasia, where they're trying to kill people.
yes, and that's a normal. So, for example, let's say something happens to you, you go to a hospital. So the first thing the doctors are going to ask you if you want to kill yourself. That's a standard. It's and
My goodness.
I'm not kidding. It's a protocol right now, and they are commanded by law right now to ask you this question. So you're in pain. Let's say you got depression. Let's say you live in such a pain that you have enough, and you go to a hospital, you go to a doctor seeking help because you're sick and tired of whatever is happening to you. You are asking for help. You're crying for help. And instead of getting this help, the first thing they say to you, we can end this pain. We can end your life. We can help you, and this will disappear. If you're depressed and you're very vulnerable or you're suicidal for whatever reasons, well, we can end that pain. We can help you. But they're not saying we can help you to fix your problem. We will help you by murdering you, and that problem will disappear. I witnessed that when my mom was murdered in a hospital by the doctors when seven doctors berated her nonstop about end this life, kill yourself, there's no hope, we cannot cure you, there's nothing we can do anymore, you're in pain, just kill yourself. Every single day in the hospital, multiple doctors a day would come and would harass her until one day her heart gave up and she died. So instead of helping people in the hospitals right now, they do everything in their power to murder. But that's one aspect. Another one, they murder disabled people because, according to the Canadian government, they're not worth living, just like the Nazis did in the 30s.
That's
So
what I was about to say. It sounds just like the Nazis before they went into the full-blown Holocaust. They were killing off their own disabled and mentally ill and physically retarded people.
250,000 German people, citizens, were murdered before the Holocaust started. You got to understand, we are witnessing a repetition of history. You have to understand that the first gas chamber, you've heard about gas chambers, right? You've heard about the Holocaust, but do you know that the first gas chambers were not in Auschwitz-Birkenau or Dachau or other concentration camps? The first gas chambers were in hospitals.
Oh,
were you aware of that?
No.
Hospitals, the doctors and the nurses were murdering people before they attacked Poland. So from 1933 to 1939, the Nazi government murdered over 1 million German people during that time. 250,000 disabled, and then they murdered others, political dissidents, of course. The concentration camps didn't start to eliminate the Jewish people or the Poles. The first victims of the Nazi regime were the good German people that opposed Adolf Hitler. Like Dietrich Bonhoeffer is a perfect example of a pastor that opposed the Nazi regime. And of course, he paid the ultimate price in 1945. He was murdered just a few days before liberation
Exactly.
by the Nazi party. So, going back to Canada, Canada is a culture of death. And who opposes the culture of death? Well, the culture, the kingdom of life, because our God is God of life. So that's why, if you were wondering why Canadians, the Canadian government, and the Canadian media hates Christians, because they have a culture of death, and we oppose the culture of death by bringing culture of life. Also, you have to add 100,000 children every year. They're being slaughtered through a holocaust of abortion in Canada. Every single year, over 100,000 babies are being slaughtered. And at the same time, Canadians, the babies that are being slaughtered, are being replaced with the haters of democracy, haters of Canada, the invaders. Because we don't have a problem with immigration in Canada. We are not dealing with immigration. This is an invasion. We are being invaded by haters of freedom, haters of Christianity, haters of the Republic, haters of the Confederation and democracy. So, 2020 started this craziness. The 2020 ended with the Christmas festival, and I think I broke some kind of a record, because for my Christmas festival, a church service, we had over 120 police officers that showed up, 54 police cars, 20 cops on bicycles, anti terrorists, special SWAT team, and a chief of police. They showed up in such a big force at our church service, and I end up with 15 tickets for that day worth millions of dollars. I was told that because of me, Calgary is going to collapse and people will die. I was labeled a grandpa killer, grandma destroyer, a terrorist. They compared me to Adolf Hitler. What did we do? Well, we had AAA steaks for the homeless. It was Christmas festival. We wanted to treat them in the best way possible. We gave away hundreds of gifts to the homeless, and we did something that, according to the villains, was unthinkable. It was horrible. I hired Christmas carolers. We were singing songs, and for that, I end up with 15 COVID tickets. So 2021 shows up, and they started to attack us in our building. And first, they blocked the entire parking lot, prohibiting people from coming in. So the police, bylaw services, peace officers blocked the driveway, and people had to park in another parking lot and walk to the church with this intimidation tactics. And then, of course, as you remember, April of 2021, the holiest time of the year. But you got to keep in mind, we have been already harassed and intimidated and ticketed for over a year. Every church service I was conducting, which was multiple times a week, usually 5, 6 times a week, we had from 3 to 30 officers attending our church service, intimidating, harassment, threats of arrest, ongoing. I was followed by the detectives. I was followed by helicopters. I was followed by unmarked police vehicles. Our house was staked. And of course, we didn't know that until later on when I was arrested for my involvement with the truck convoy. So that was 2021, April, when those officers broke the law. They entered our land. They were trespassing, breaking all kinds of laws under Criminal Code of Canada, Section 176, 1, 2, and 3. I kicked them out. I told them to get out. And that video went crazy. That video was watched over 1 billion times. I started to do interviews and letting people know how to resist the tyranny. And then 3 weeks later, The anti-terrorists showed up, and I was arrested in the middle of the highway with my brother David, charged, taken to prison, 3 days, 2 nights on concrete, faced a crooked judge, Adam Germain. And then later on, he gave us the compelled speech order, which was an order from the court telling us that we must, every time we speak to another human being, we must recite a government approved script about COVID 19, which is Soviet style, China, North Korea style, dictatorship. And so we were found guilty on everything. I went to the States. I did my best to awaken the American people because I told them, listen, we are here today. They're attacking us today, but you be sure of it, they're going to go after you as well. It's just a matter of when. So I did a tour. I spent 4 months in the United States. I traveled pretty much all of your states. I boarded about 100 planes back and forth. I attended conferences with 10, 15,000 people. Reawaken Our America tour with Trump family and General Flynn.
We're about to run out of time. We're gonna have to we're gonna have to make a part 3 because I want to hear about your tour in the States. Take a minute and say whatever you got to say to the folks because we're about to run out of time.
Well, yeah, there's so much more, of course, what happened to me in prison after arrival, but I'm going to save that for the part 3. I wrote a book about this whole ordeal. Sometimes when you do interviews, you can only tell the people so much, right? Because you're running out of time. But all of it, the whole story, the background story, why I call them the Nazis, why I call them Gestapo. I'm referencing history. I'm telling you what I observed when I was growing up, that this is copy paste, that someone is writing a book or reading a book, How to Become a Tyrant. That's exactly what we are witnessing. It's Lions Do Not Bow. Lions Do Not Bow. It's on Amazon.ca, Amazon.com. I encourage you to pick it up. It's the book that has been confiscated by the Canadian government already 3 times. So that tells you everything you need to know. They are afraid of what's in it. And the questions, why I did it, why I do what I do, why I refuse to bow before the modern day Hamans of today, why I refuse to bow before the golden muzzle, or whatever you want to call it, of today's Nebuchadnezzars. So again, I want to end with this. As crazy as the story sounds, I want you to understand that no matter what the enemy is willing or is unleashing on you, you always have to understand that our God is bigger than all of those minions out there. The greater is He that is in us than the one that is in them. We have to always keep in mind that God is telling us that the only thing He needs from us or wants from us is to show up and praise Him. Like Jehoshaphat, just show up, dressed for battle, and praise me, worship me, and I will do the rest. So the story of Artur Pawlowski is very simple. The story of our family is very simple. We just showed up and we said, here we are, Lord. Do with us as you please. Use us as you want. And we are here at your service. And we also have to understand that we know we can be confident because we know how the story ends, and we win in the end. The enemy just doesn't know it yet. And I love that, because when you show up in the middle of a fight, in the middle of the battlefield, but the victory has been already guaranteed to you, well, it's just everything else is just a formality. And I want to encourage you with this. Just show up. Just do what he's telling you to do, because he knows what is going to happen tomorrow. We don't. We don't know what is going to happen tomorrow, but he does. And when he's telling you to do something, do it, because great will be your reward for obeying the living God. Amen.
Amen. Let me stop you right there. Well, wow. So I didn't know we were going to go 3 times, but this is part 2 of Crisis in Canada with Pastor Art Pawlowski. And stay tuned for part 3. This is Sam Tolley saying I'm out.